did that was alternative currency.
Yeah. Was what?
Alternative currency.
Alternative currency.
He's an expert in this. Maybe you could just add a few more details.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. This, you know, from religion or religious stories that sometimes demons may help good people, and good people may be in the army of the demons. Hitler had a good man in his government called Hjalmar Schacht, who was a great humanist. He was leader of the Reichsbank and financial minister. And he was appointed in 1933. Actually, he had been Reichsbank leader also in the 1920s, and he was the one who killed the hyperinflation. You remember the hyperinflation of the 1920s in Germany, when they had to have a
wheelbarrow and carry their money to shop.
Yeah. Many people here were not born then.
I wasn't around in those days, no.
And in 1933, when he was reappointed, he agreed to, because people was completely depressed, not only the economy but the people's mind completely, and there was impossible to get money abroad, or nobody wanted to lend money to the government. So he invented a new currency, but people did not realize it was a new currency. It was a kind of bond obligation, which was called in a fictitious company. People did believe that the company existed even. It was called Metallforschung, which means research in metals. You know, those words sounds very good in German ears. Metal and research. And they could be exchanged for Deutschmark between 3 months or after 5 years. And since they could be exchanged for Deutschmark, then the companies accepted them. And so they were using this instead of the Deutschmark for business. And then they were planning what to do in whole Germany, as you know, the autostradas, the channeling, the whatever infrastructure that had to be done. And also, after some years, also, of course, the armament. Hjalmar Schacht himself, he resigned actually, because he went openly out against the persecution of the Jews. He printed also in the Reichsbank 250,000 copies to protest against the Kristallnacht. And he also he realized that Hitler was preparing for war. So instead he had some other prepared for us coup d'etat actually in the late 1938 during the mini crisis. He was put in concentration camp actually. He resigned in beginning of 39. And and he was put in concentration camp in 1944 because he was one of those who wanted to kill Hitler, you know, in July 1944. But he survived the war and put to trial in Nuremberg, where he was completely acquitted. So.
He's not only an economist, he's also a professor of history, just in case you didn't notice it. Okay, yes.
The question is then, if Iceland came out of the crisis because they were not connected with the global EU, what is the solution for Portugal to come out of it? What is the force or moral force they have to take to come out of this situation?
I think that Portugal should go back and again apply for membership in EFTA, which they were in EFTA, the European Free Trade Association, together with Ireland or whoever, anyway, and Austria Now only Iceland, Norway and Switzerland and Liechtenstein is left there. The four most successful countries in Europe. Coincidence? But you can go back to EFTA and leave. First of all, you must leave the euro as quickly as possible. Refuse to pay the debt. That you can do inside the EU even, like Ireland tried, and take over and nationalize and don't subsidize the failing banks, like Iceland did, Norway did, Argentina did, and drop the euro, of course, restore national. Actually, the best thing would be that the European Union collapsed as quickly as possible, because it's very hard for a small country to stand up against all the big ones, even if you're right. And you will survive doing it also, but the politicians, they don't have the guts. The elites, they don't want.
No, but leaving the euro, you will have to close the borders because of capital movements. You still have another currency
Exactly.
that does mean nothing. The other currency will still devaluate forever and ever until the debt, until the government bills be equilibrated.
Yeah, it will devaluate, yes,
When
like
they
50% or something. Like Iceland also had to devaluate, but it stopped there when they had it devaluated enough.
Yes.
So anyway, we will have to leave
We are
the
very dependent in the oil.
And apples.
We don't produce much energy.
but people think that we will not get to sell our goods, our oil, and but still, people are thinking that it is the nations which trade with each other, but it's not. It's private companies which trade with each other. So the trade will go on.
Because we have some sectors of activity, like hospitality, and others, that
Tourist industry.
yes, exporting. That would suffer a lot in terms of revenue.
Tourism.
Yes.
If
Exporting. I'm talking about
Portugal is super cheap.
if you have a devaluation in your currency.
Yes, then
Your
even more tourists will come here. Then.
No, we have a restriction airports. We don't have train, high-speed train.
Oh, you have to be.
You are limited in our only the sea is a chance for
You mean you don't have enough infrastructure
yes
to take
more
people,
exactly.
but at least
In the short term.
In the short term. But then it's a matter of just being
Investment.
out.
So all the investment stopped for a new airport and for this new high-speed train connecting to Madrid.
No.
Yes, not now, some years ago. So that's the problem. In this
Because of the
particular
euro crisis.
devaluating the money, leaving the euro causes this problem. Our trade balance account is now a surplus, and with the devaluation of the currency, the trade balance would become negative again.
No. When you devaluate, the opposite happens.
No.
The export will become cheaper and the import will.
But that has to do with the elasticity, how much you can sell more if you lower your price.
Yeah.
If you lower your price and you cannot sell more of your goods, you will not make more revenue.
If your goods are cheaper, then you sell
We are
more.
getting a little bit too technical for some of the audience. We receive another question. Is okay? Okay,
Desculpe, fazer em português.
Tá ótimo.
Um dos itens do prospecto que eu tenho diz precisamos de um novo modelo econômico que olhe para o mundo como ele realmente é. É uma pergunta, desculpa. E eu tenho visto nas respostas muito investimento, euro, dívida. Não deveríamos estar usando outros tipos de conceitos
conceitos, de significados, para identificar as soluções para a situação que nós estamos vivendo?
Não tenho esse experimento. Acho que não compreendi bem a pergunta.
Às vezes enxergar de outra forma essa deles. E parece que nós estamos usando os mesmos termos do modelo existente.
I can translate. So in the prospect we talk about new economic models, but he's listening now that you are using the same old terms like debt and finance system and whatever, and he's asking about shouldn't we be talking about new kind of economic models, new words, new concepts.
Okay, this is mono.
It's the same, since this new economic model is practically impossible to materialize without leaving the four freedoms, the free movement of capital, etc., which is in the union's constitution. So you have to force out of the European Union first, or you can pray that it cracks by itself, which is quite probable. I pray for that, since it's quite probable anyway. So that we will be spared for this great trouble.
I don't necessarily agree that Europe should be following
The European Union, that's something else.
for the European Union. About your question first, I think we are in a very deep shit. Sorry for the word, and it's part of my film as well. I'm going to be quoting my own film all the time. Sorry for the self-propaganda here, but so what we need now is like an economic and social relief program to stabilize the situation first. So the proposal would be to do like a wealth tax, to have a mass redistribution of wealth. Something that has been said before is also like to nationalize the banking sector and to put it under control of the community. So I think that in order to go to a society where people and nature and not profit is first, I think there are many ideas and there are many models, but I think there is not a blueprint. I think there is we need like a very large discussion, and something that everybody will be able to participate in. You know? And that is not something that you do in 1 or 2 weeks. That's going to be a process of many years. It's not something that can be imposed like this. We're going to do this, and it's going to be all solved. And we need some economic relief, doing radical democratic measures, like, for example, nationalization of banks and etc. In order to create breathing room to like really think, okay, how are we going to do this in a more sustainable way? About the European Union, is that I'm not sure it's going to help to substitute a union that is also like a pretty weak union that works under a certain economic assumption, and then change that for going back to do the same on a national level. I don't think that's the real issue. I do believe that the European Union is conceived out of neoliberal capitalist thinking, and that is something that should be people or should be shifted. Yeah. I also believe that a shift is going to happen on national levels. I don't believe it's going to happen because the European youth is going to stand up because looking back at Latin America, for example, indigenous movements that were very strong part of the movement of change, and even though they are not hindered by borders, it was within nations, within the nation states that the things happened. But I don't want to throw away the union like this, because instead of like turning our back on it, we should try to change it in the course of it. Because again, the challenges that we are seeing as a species, as a human species on this planet, are global challenges. For example, the heating up of the planet. And I think that regional unions like the European Union can play an important role in it.
But
Sorry, just let me make a comment on the question that was made. Eu, se calhar respondo em português, os termos que estão a ser utilizados, no fundo temos um problema com várias dimensões. Temos um problema na parte como cada um de nós decide viver, temos um problema ecológico, temos vários tipos de problemas e temos um problema económico também. E a conferência aqui gira um pouco à volta de como alterar a forma como esse paradigma económico funciona. Portanto, isso requer que nós olhemos para a crise dos bancos, para a questão das moedas, para todas estas questões do emprego, do vencimento. Estes termos têm que ser postos em causa. Claro que o objetivo é algo mais do que isso, mas estamos aqui a ver como é que podemos engrenar esses objetivos, estas novas direções de dar uma forma de viver com objetivos, que haja um desenvolvimento da sociedade humana, em vez de estarmos a viver para trabalhar e para pagar dívida. Mas estamos a tentar transformá-la em algo concreto, daí a necessidade de facto ser utilizado isto. Não sei se ficou durar. Sorry,
I think ideas like constitutionally guaranteed minimum requirements, if you like, constitutionally guaranteed employment, ethical ceilings on wealth. These are simple language, but the principle is pretty clear. Some months ago, some of us were also debating about this issue of the European Union. And the fact remains that as long as you have freedom of capital and goods moving, and you have unequal economies, the strong ones are going to prevail. So one idea was to have tiers, levels, so and restrictions amongst the levels. So Portugal, for example, could find other countries in the EU of a similar level of economic development and have, active trade and interaction with those countries, but restrictions against countries at a much higher level, and in that way protect itself and still be part of some kind of union. So, yes.
Sorry, just a funny example of this. É o mesmo que pormos para lá do Mike Tyson no ringue e dizemos, ok, agora luta livre, sem restrições.
Queria falar sobre uma...
Sorry, desculpa.
Like Argentina, you might know about the Argentinian example that in 2001 Argentina collapsed economically, and they refused to pay any more of their debts because they couldn't. And for 3 years there was a stalemate, and Argentina also, but what was original their problems, they had tied their currency to the dollar, so it was greatly overvalued, like the escudo is today, or that had been recommended by the IMF actually, and was greatly responsible for the crisis. Argentina cut that tie in 2001, and immediately their currency devaluated, And it helped Argentina a lot through the difficulties. And the state took a more active role in economic policies, privatized, enterprise were renationalized. And you may have seen that the president, Mrs. Bachelet or something, now renationalized the oil company against
Chile.
Huh?
She's in Chile.
Oh,
Kirchner.
Kirchner, yes, Kirchner. She renationalized the oil company against big protests from Madrid, as you might recollect, yes. And 3 years later, I mean 2004, their creditors came humbly back and asked for a deal, and they agreed upon 50%. So, and Argentina has found willing buyers to their bonds and obligations and so. So there was no economic catastrophe. There was some difficulties. Maybe you have to eat only bacalao, or, but it's better that, oh yeah, brinjals or eggplants. But it's better to suffer a bit and to stand for what is right and for the dignity of our country, and be a little thinner maybe.
Okay,
But, yeah.
before giving the word to Bruno, estão a perceber mais ou menos o que é dito, estão a conseguir acompanhar bem?
Sim, eu agora falaria em português só para introduzir um tema que eu tenho estudado, que é a economia colaborativa. Portanto, se vocês repararem, há uma série de empresas da internet que estão a aparecer neste momento, como por exemplo a Apple, Airbnb, que, portanto, estão...
É possível utilizar, porque as pessoas não são fixas
you maybe have noticed that there are some companies growing in the internet, like Groupon, Airbnb, and others that are exploring and extracting still the property of the commons. So what's happening? There is a lot more than we think in the commons property to be explored and extracted.
Collective property, commons.
Yes.
Some wealth which
And
hasn't
people-
been privatized. Wealth
So-
which has not been privatized.
People use that services, it's useful for them, but that's why we still in the logic of the economic concepts, because we are accepting with our money, with our resources, to support the economy. That's the reality. We are not noticing, but the extraction of the commons is still a lot of space to grow. So it is inevitable that we will still talk about about money and economic concepts if we are still using money to ask our friends to share our apartment and that kind of exchanges. Portanto, supostamente, por exemplo, uma empresa de aluguer de automóveis, a renting company of automobile, car sharing or carpooling, renting is a company that uses the concept of the community. It is sharing services or products that can be reused, and they earn. It is very efficient. It is the most efficient because the good is being used. It's not dead. It's not the dead weight. It's being exploited to the full capacity. That could be done by the capitalistic system or by a cooperative. That's the only difference. We have to choose what company we think deserves our money to provide that kind of services.
I'd like to ask a question connecting to the topic of David. Why it's like this human now tend to do activities, speculative activities, not like productive, extractive, transforming, but so much there or mental or whatever. And why this, if this is some of the causes for this crisis, to stop of this kind of activity?
Yes, it's a cause of the crisis. Speculation is when rich people who have a lot of money they are not interested in starting a new factory or a new plantation because it costs a lot of money and it takes a lot of people, and a lot of people means a lot of headaches, and they get maybe 5 or 10% interest in the first few years. Whereas if they go to the casino, now you can either go to a regular casino or you can go to the stock market casino, it's like the same thing. And there you gamble, the chances you can get 50, 100, 200% profit in a very short time, no work, no headache. So for rich people, it's much more interesting to do speculation. And of course now, you know, Wall Street almost doesn't exist anymore. There's very few brokers anymore. It's all done by computers. And it's now done counting in the tenths of seconds the buying and selling of shares. Tenths of seconds. So computers are programmed to, the moment the price raises this much, they buy it, and the moment it drops this much, they sell. And it's all being done automatically. Algorithms. So yes, there's no tax on those transactions. And the Tobin tax and other possibilities is to tax those, to not let people buy and sell in a matter of seconds, to insist that they have to keep an investment for 3 days if they're going to invest, for example, or longer, and to pay a tax on that. One of the problems, of course, that Saudi economic democracy and any other alternative has is a tendency for very rich people to move. If Portugal institutes a wealth tax, for example, what are all the 3 richest Portuguese do? They're going to move across the border to Spain. That's what Swedes did when they made the Tetra Pak, you know, and they were very successful, and Sweden and high taxes, so they moved to the UK, you know, lower taxes there. It's a tendency, and so that's why, yes, we need to build our economies, make our countries independent, and yet build relations with other, as you said, other like-minded economies that are more or less on the same scale with us, so it's fair. It's not you're dealing with the corporations or the German. So this is all necessarily possible, and one more step in this process is to do it gradually. All the research shows that when there's a lower gap between the poor and the richest people, when more social equanimity, egalitarianism it's called. Yes, thank you. When there's more of that, everybody's happier. All the stress goes down, and the depression goes, suicide goes down, mental illness, drug use goes down, everything goes down, and people are happier. But to do it gradually, to implement a small tax, and then increase that tax, and then increase that tax, so that hopefully the wealthier people will stick around, or many of them will stick around, and the economy can grow, everybody can benefit, and gradually it becomes more cooperative in nature and just. Yeah, the Nordic, but although some people have left, most have stayed. And it's interesting that I was just reading the other day that Nordic people, Scandinavian people who migrate tend to be young singles looking for opportunities. But when they get married and want to have children, they move back because of all the benefits, so they don't mind paying higher taxes because such a good value for that. So there hasn't been this, the logic, okay, if you raise the taxes, everyone will go. You provide very good services, you create a very good environment, and people are well taken. There's reasons to stay. Also.
Same thing in Portugal that is the way that's so high taxes. And that the social looking lower and lower and lower.
It's interesting because there is an emphasis on reduction of state expense. But at the same time, parallel systems are being thought to handle the same services and private, and is also being discussed that somehow they will be also financed, or some money will be there from the next payment. So we will create a sort of private state service funded in part by all the consumers. So it's again, you could say
this is because the government is accepting the responsibility for all these debts, and somebody has to pay them and putting it onto the shoulders of the public.
Can I tell something here? Once I took a taxi car, I needed to the bags, and often here the driver stops people in the cars. It's usual. Life, politics, economics, everything, football, everything. And it was the beginning of this year. And I was so angry about what's going on, about the economy at the time. And he asked me why I was so upset. And I told him. And I said, and he said, but don't worry, you're going to pay the debt. No, you don't have money. How are you going to pay the debt? No, we ask for the loan because we have the money to pay. No, we don't. So I think the people don't have the knowledge that they don't have. There's no there is go on. So it's a misconception in my mind. I think the journalists, the media is not doing a good job here. So I think that is also important.
But the media is leftist. They want to govern as soon as possible. I guess it's my idea.
The media is against
Our media is, yes,
Our news was something I didn't understand. Against,
but it's
I guess.
controlled by. So it's not the same. The opinion that they have to say is not the same way as they think. So you might see the journalists in a protest, but then they have to say something in national news, because news are always controlled and checked. You have the National News Agency. So it's not what you see on television, it's not exactly what they're thinking.
I don't see television.
Okay, when you read the newspaper, I know, when you see in official media, it doesn't reflect what the journalist actually thinks.
Yes. One question, since we are talking about communication and this taxation of the stock market and putting some kind of contribution from the profit for something useful. This seems so easy to communicate and so easy for everyone to agree on it. Why this is not never gain momentum? And can anyone correct me?
to bring up elsewhere. So that's why the Tobin tax started with high, then they lowered it, and they abandoned it in the end.
Okay.
I think one of the things that we were talking about is taxation. The main difficulty is that it has to be implemented universally at the same time. So, like, at the same time, I feel a bit mixed feelings because in certain things we have to think regionally and locally, like the local resilience.
Has a lot of impact on our lives.
Come to Venezuela.
Okay.
In Venezuela, what happened is the people decided they voted in President Chavez, who came to power and won 16 out of 17 elections because he did all his programs for the poor. The rich people, by and large, hated him and hate the current president because they're losing power, they're losing influence. They still have a lot of money, there's still capitalism side by side with all these socialist enterprises and cooperatives. But it's very interesting, the transition that's taken place, and whether the word is good or not, the empowerment, the capacity that the common people are given to decide their own economic and political future. And it's possible. I'm not going to be an apologist for the government, but many, many positive things have taken place through elections.
What's the probabilistic solution to the crisis? You want to talk about the book about, so what is the comprehensive solution towards the present
It's
situation?
called economic democracy. It's what we've been talking about all morning.
What are the specific aspects of bringing about changes in this present crisis?
I suggest the following. We have about 12 minutes. I would break it into two, one focusing on this area, but maybe specifically for Portugal. Maybe we could, if you want to comment on the Portuguese case, what you think that could be helpful on bringing about on our line of this. And then we go to the topic that was raised about arts and communication, and how to engage these skills of society in social. So if anyone wants to start with specific measures that could be applied in the case of Portugal, please. I see that the living the euro is already a division.
Yeah, but I think Dana made a very sound proposition that you could go along with Spain and Italy maybe, and to have a regional, it's not so radical, with more similar economies. That would be a proposition that would not scare the public so much.
How would you, when I said about making tier levels, how do you exchange goods and services? Let's say Germany has a high quality stuff, television for example, and because we're all working on scale, how would these local people be able to reach and get those high quality materials produced in higher richer countries? How would that happen?
How they could buy it?
Yeah.
They will not afford that. They don't have to have this.
Isn't that what is causing all the crises? Like in Africa,
No television. Either here or you watch television.
like in Africa, what's happening today? Let me just read. That's there are in different parts in Africa, and many parts of Africa, the cloth industry is being totally destroyed because of a Danish agency called exchange of goods in terms of collecting old clothes and sending it to Africa and destroy the whole local economy. So how do you resolve this? Because the country is only one high quality stuff. The economy is gone. That cloth industry I'm talking about. So like that, how do you find solution if you make tier level and working together and then the bigger economies have big stuff, the small ones want to get, but they cannot. How do you resolve this issue?
In the short term, you may have to accept a lower standard. But just to give a concrete example, South Korea faces a problem. Low standard. China faces a problem. Compared to Japan and other places, they're much lower standard. But the government had a strong hand in South Korea and simply wouldn't accept it. So they'd come with some substandard good and they wouldn't be accepted. And so there was really strong pressure by the government, which had quite a lot of power to control the industry, to raise the standard quickly. And they did raise the standard quickly. So the quality of South Korean goods got higher year by year. So it's not impossible. And everyone, when the first people started talking about Japanese, and then the Asian tigers groups considered to be very poor quality, but they quickly improved. So it's many the standards being brought up. But within that time, when they were improving, all of those countries very carefully protected their own industries.
Protected their own industries means, yes, they closed the borders to imports and they charged a tax on any certain essential goods or any goods that were competing with their own industries. It's called nationalist economics. Every one of the rich countries got rich that way. But now they want to say, oh, you should let us sell to you and no taxes. But they never allowed other, competing industrial goods to be imported free. No, never. They always charge taxes. And this is the struggle that Mondragon, the cooperatives in Mondragon have, because when Spain joined the EU, suddenly the 30% tax on imported electrodomesticals, the house appliances, home appliances, Fabor, the major cooperative of the Mondragon 102 cooperative network, suddenly they were forced to compete with no more protection. And so they tried to become a multinational corporation. They're selling hard to compete with China, for example. So, yes.
Okay, we have 5 minutes to conclude, so I will just ask Patricia if you want to say something about the role of arts. I think you are more expert on arts than most of the panel. And
No, I wanted really to hear the opinion of Peter DePont, and I wanted to hear his experience because he was working more or less with activism and the role of communication also in arts, and also from his experience in Europe. What do you feel that in the past few years has changed? You're more in the role of maybe media and communication, but you probably have contact also with artists. And if artists are getting more empowered, again, this word empowered, to speak their own critical views about the world or not, or if they are getting more afraid, and really, because in Portugal, I think in the past 2 years, you see more artists in demonstrations. There was silence, for example, from we had a big, during the 70s, the intervention of music and all the singers from the revolution and all this, and now they're coming back, they're appearing again, after in the 90s and in the beginning of the 2000s. So, what do you think?
Okay, after Peter has replied, each of the panel speakers can take 1 minute to say a concluding contribution that you want, and then we will close. Okay.
There was once a Chilean theater group that wanted to make the theater play that would convince everybody that we needed a very just society. How they were going to make this piece of art that would convince everybody. So they went into a basement and they worked and they worked and they worked for like 10, 20 years until they were like really convinced that this was going to be the play that was going to convince everybody. And then they came up, and the problem was that everything that they wanted to tell in the play already happened. So this is the script from a Chilean theater play that I really liked, and I've started with this to say that to the relativity of it all. Also, saying that, for me personally, I often get the critique that okay, so you try to be an artist, you try to talk about society, but as an artist you cannot not have an opinion. You must, because poetry doesn't have an opinion. And I say, well, that's a very strong opinion to me. So for me personally, that's as a documentary filmmaker, you tell stories about people, about characters in the world, and people trying to change things just make for very interesting characters. I'm just the possibilities of that. So there is some personal gain for me in there as well, in making something. On the other hand, it's impossible for me to be in the world that we're living and not be a social commentator. It's I try to be to listen a little bit to my critics, but I just can't. I just automatically are making the films that I'm making. But that's a personal thing for me. And about what you're saying about the other artists in Europe, I think that many, because now in this crisis the inequality is becoming so obvious that of course it's inspiring a lot of people to find creative ways to act against that. But I'm not an expert on that subject, but I can tell that in Belgium, for example, there is now a movement starting of artists, and it's going to work around the cultural policies of the European Union. Because the European Union is instead of seeing culture as a basic right, it's seeing it as a commodity. So it's now in the new cultural policy, which is called Creative Europe. That's the name. It's the whole way that society should look at culture.
It's also the way that you're thinking of normative power. It's not the power. So they pass on their message in propaganda because then they give you the funds. And that's all very nice. We like having funds to be creative, but the idea is that they support you and then you pass on their message.
Just when comment from Paddy is also an artist, so he was raising the hand.
I just want to add something. I think something very important that is not only in artists, I mean in everybody, is the inner view, the look inside what's happening with us, no, in ourselves, no? Because as somebody said in the forum, basically we're looking for happiness, no? And this happiness is related to the society. So the role of artists is, from my opinion, has these two directions: inner view, what is really happening, what's really looking for, and what's happening, no, around us, no, what's happening in the society, in order to put the images, in order to put the videos, the songs, the whatever what we are doing, to improve, no, to go deeper in this whole process of our development.
Okay, I'm sure we will continue talking for 1 hour or at least more. If someone wants to make any final comment, please, and we will.
I want to see your film tonight.
Isn't it going to be shown right now?
No.
I want to see your film now.
It's going to be shown now.
No.
I thought it was very nice how we were brainwashed in your film. We are all brainwashed by market capitalism. We believe to think that everything can be sold on the market. So when I read that book, The Great Transformation by Karl Kolaki, how he wrote it in 1944. He was the editor of the biggest finance magazine in Vietnam, Austria, before the war, and he's saying that if the market takes over marketing, take over areas of life which has never been created to be a part of a market, to be a commodity, like people, labor, like soil, or currency, money. They are never intended to be part of a market, and they call the market thinking as a satanic grinding machine which destroys the fabric of society if we allow them to be bought and sold. The market is only an appendix to the real society, and that's the beauty of products, actually. That they have realized that, but still we have not realized it ourselves. We are so brainwashed into this, into thinking that everything can be bought and sold. So I should like that. Okay, I can hear the rest.
Yeah, the E.F. Shoemaker, the author of Small is Beautiful, said that the truth is something which gets more and more difficult to avoid every day. So I think we should be optimistic. If you stand in the center of a room, sooner or later somebody's going to bump into you. I think we have to stick to what we know in art expresses love for humanity, and we have to do more and more networking and link up with each other. And I think it's just a matter of time.
Bruno will be the last one to speak.
I just think we should experiment whatever we think we should do. We should not be afraid of doing it. And if we believe in it, we should not only talk about it.
faço um breve intervalo, acho que deve haver minutos, já vou ver.
15 minutos.